about is, where am I going to go? And, what sort of university should I look toward to actually satisfy my career objectives? Is it going to be a big university? If it's a really big, high-profile university, one of the advantages is that typically you have tremendous resource support. Okay? In our mechanical engineering department, for example, we have one secretary and a part-time student assistant. And when professors need help, beyond the classroom, I mean, helping them write proposals, carry out a lot of legwork, it's a lot of that work is on us. I'm not sure how it is on the other departments, but in engineering, we have to do a lot of that. We're not a small school, but we're not a big school, and that's one thing you need to think about. Just because you go to a big school, you have advantages, you have disadvantages. I'll point out one disadvantage. If you go to a very, very high-profile school, well, there are greater expectations. So you have all these resources, but perhaps they might expect you to bring in even more money. We'll talk about that with some of these slides. Produce more, carry more students because you have more resources. Any comments from the panel on kind of selecting, how do they go about selecting that school? I needless to say, my guess is, hey, throw out your CV to as many places as possible and see what hits.
That's pretty much it. It's sort of carpet bombing is the way to go. But when you have a chance, you have to take a hard look at what it is that the place cares about and what it is that you want to spend your time doing. There are universities that are centrally focused on teaching, don't have very many research expectations at all. There are universities that really don't care what your teaching looks like. They care about your grant work and your research, and that's it. So you have to kind of fit who you're going to be with what the university is actually asking of you. If you're a researcher, you're going to be unhappy at a teaching college, and vice versa.
Yeah, an example of that, many of you are familiar with Lawrence Tech. Wonderful university. Primarily a teaching university. They do research there, but their teaching load is heavy, and some people love it. I really like the balance that we have at Oakland University. We focus on teaching, but also we have to conduct research, and that's perfect for me. Other schools, as Dr. Smith said, it's possible perhaps to get your tenure by being an outstanding researcher, but subpar teacher.
Like Michigan. Michigan gives everybody tenure who's a fantastic researcher and is a horrible teacher. I can think of at least 5 different professors who I know personally who qualify in that.
There you go. So these are things, yes?
How do you know going in?
What?
You have to talk to the assistant professors about what it is that their expectations are. They will tell you what they have to do and what they're being expected to do. The people who are interviewing you on the upper level panels may not communicate the expectations very clearly, but the assistant professors around the department absolutely will share that information with you.
That actually ties into our next slide pretty nicely. Yeah. Both parties are taking a risk. They're going to go through the interview, all right, but they really don't know you until you spend some time with them, several years. They see how you react when you have a final exam to give, but you also have like 10 hours to get a major proposal out to NSF. How do you handle that stress? You don't know, Meredith, to your point, you can talk to the assistant professors, and that is a great way to learn about the institution because at the interview, I don't want to say it's smoke and mirrors, but they're going to tell you all the positive things, and you will find out that that major center that they talked about was a broom closet. So, you learn about things as time goes on. It's a risk. They're taking a risk on you, and you're taking a risk on them. All right, next slide. Oh, comment, question, yes.
How about type of student? And that's in the school, because I might select the school based on the student. I mean, I would love to be teaching, and I would love to have the knowledge. I don't want to go for a high cost school. I know what type of student there, they could really afford to pay for this one. I could really choose based on this type of students.
Yeah.
I think also, like when I interviewed, every place I interviewed, I had the opportunity to sit with students, graduate students for a while, and the students come to your presentation and say, I think you're right. It's good to get a feel for, of course they're going to give you the good students, but you can ask them some honest questions. What motivates you? What kind of research are you doing? What do you think of the professor? It's good to talk to them.
I want to comment and extend on that, and this is a good point about, you asked about, what kind of students are there. But you guys have to remember that part of your responsibility is to shape and mold these students. So they're going to come in, whether they are, highly qualified, hopefully they are highly qualified, capable, but you know what, they might not have the work ethic. They might not understand what does it mean to really conduct research, to objectively look at their data. If they're undergraduate students, what does it mean to participate in research and not get involved with plagiarism, little things like that. That's a big part of your responsibility, particularly at the universities that focus on teaching and research. So teaching is way more than just what we're doing here in the classroom. It's one-on-one interaction. So it's not only what you're going to get out of students, but what are you going to be putting into the students? So there could be opportunities.
One of the other things, following up on the idea of risk, is the idea that the university is taking a huge risk on the junior faculty, because when you're first coming out of graduate school, you haven't had an opportunity really to establish yourself as a researcher on your own. And so it's really hard for universities to make decisions about hiring junior faculty. It's much easier hiring associate or full faculty because they've had a long track record on their own. But it's really difficult, so it's very important to be sure to establish yourself and show what you're capable of during graduate school so universities are willing to take a risk on it.
So this next slide, really, I just want to kind of ask the question, what are professors? And there are many different definitions, but professors are dreamers. We typically dream up new ideas. I bet every panelist here spends time over the weekend thinking about whether they like it or not. It's there. They're always thinking about new ideas. How can they improve something? They are idea machines, and we will dream about things sometimes that are impossible, and that is you as a professor also. That's the sort of mentality that you probably have now, and that's going to carry you right into your as an assistant professor, you're dreaming about ideas. Next slide. Even if, I'll read it, says, professors are eternally optimistic about their abilities to realize their research and scholarly dreams. So, always optimistic. I haven't met a professor, at least in engineering, that's not optimistic about their research. They might have very, very disappointing results in some of their experiments or analyses, but they're always thinking about, what if? In fact, you guys are probably doing this with your dissertations. You're not getting that program working. Well, what if I do this? That's kind of the essence of being a professor. Could you guys talk a little bit about, I guess, the role that creativity plays in what you do in your scholarship or research?
Well, in engineering, I think across the board, the whole basis of your research is to come up with new ideas, right? You're not going to get things funded unless it's a new, innovative plan. Even now with the NIH grants for science research, they restructured it so that part of it is you have to write a page just on innovation. How is this innovative? How is this changing the world? How is it affecting the patients that you're working with? And so I think that's probably your primary goal with research is coming up with new innovative ideas that you can share.
I was just at a PhD defense today, and the student, there were a lot of people there, he defended, and he did pass. However, one of the professors had concerns about his dissertation, and their concern was this. They said, you showed me what your model did. Your mathematical model did this, it did that, and you talked about what everyone else has done, but you really didn't compare what your model, how did your model compare to the 5 other models that are already out there? And so the professor really saw that as a deficiency because that student really did not demonstrate clearly why was his model better than the ones that were already out there. And that's extremely important for you as you develop your dissertations. And I keep on saying dissertations. I think there's other forms of what you have to defend, but you have to draw that distinction and talk about what is it about my model that makes it better, and you have to be show that in a quantitative way. It's really, really important.
Yeah. The other thing is you have to spend a fairly large amount of time keeping up. There's a lot of doctoral students finish up, and the dissertation is the last time that they have gone into the literature to figure out, well, what is out there, what is new, what are people concerned about, what are they working on. Once you finish your dissertation, I understand you don't actually want to look at it ever again, but you do have to keep up because the field keeps moving ahead of you, and if you're not spending at least an hour a week, maybe 3 hours, maybe 5 hours, looking at what's coming out, what people are doing that's innovative, you're not going to keep your own ideas current to where the field has gone.
Excellent. And this ties into, Dr. Smith talked about your idea. Well, you're going to write a paper, if you haven't already, and that paper is going to come back with criticism. Just expect it. When I got my first paper, I received harsh criticism on my first paper. I took it personally, okay, because that was my baby, and they were criticizing it. It was my work. I was going to save the world with this idea. But get used to it, right? I mean, because you have to really have a thick skin as a professor, because you stand in front of people, you say, hey, this is my idea, and you're setting yourself up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The last paper I submitted to Journal of Pediatrics, the paper was 15 pages long, but our response letter to the concerns from critics was 37 pages long.
Right. Yeah, so that's part of the life of a professor. One thing I want to say, and this, looking at this cartoon here, there's a lot of messages here. One is, as an assistant professor, or even as a full professor, you are almost literally running your small business. You have a product, you have human resources, you have physical resources, you have a budget, you have space, you have constraints. You're running a business. You have you very rarely, at least in engineering, did the department chair look over my shoulder constantly, ask me, Lorenzo, what are you doing and why? You're pretty much on your own, sink or swim on your own. You have support from the administration, but you're running a business. And I often thought how valuable it would have been for me to have had business training. Before I even began my work at Oakland, it would have really helped me. I think I could have benefited from understanding more about, managing I think the budget side. The budget, yeah. So do keep that in mind.
And also along those lines, being a salesman from the standpoint of communication is so important. Because you can love research and sit in the lab all day and do your research, but if you never find an effective way to tell people about that, even in your presentations, think about the seminars you've been to. And the ones you remember are the ones that were innovative presentations that present things in an effective way. And it's not just, you present, people remember you, but then you submit grant proposals. The people reviewing your grant proposals are reading how many proposals, maybe 50 proposals, and if yours isn't straightforward, easy to read, I talked to someone who was reviewing proposals recently, and he said for every proposal he reads, he goes into literature and looks at 20 articles or, and can you imagine, you want it to be easy for them, so that if they have to look something up, they know exactly what you're talking about. You don't want to bog someone down in the proposal because otherwise it's going to get tossed, they're not going to make it through.
You have to be a salesperson. Yeah, question.
Why is a new idea? Because everyone pushes us to come with a new ideas. Why is not an existing idea and improving that existing idea? I mean, it's because going after new ideas, I know it's good, but sometimes it's so hard. Why am I going to go after a new idea? I go to the existing idea, try to improve it. That might also help.
Because
Yeah,
you
I
have
would.
to be a stronger salesman to do that. Because you have to persuade somebody that what you have to offer is a significant improvement over what this other person already did. Whereas presenting a new idea, you just have to show them what the new idea is. So you've got a lot harder argument to make to say, well, yes, everybody already knows this, but here's one step above it. Well, is that one step really worth it? You've got to make the argument. It's not a matter of what other people want to do. It's a matter of what you can make a case for and get the funding to back it up.
But at the same time, you're risking of the new idea having been approved or having been really implemented. Maybe it's not practical at all. Maybe you come to that one. However, when you bring another existing idea that is already there, that you could really take what is already been unbuilt over it to come with a different concept or different improvement.
Well, I think that most of these new ideas are built off of your previous findings or what you're aware of. So when we say new idea, it's probably not something completely new out of the blue.
Yeah.
It's something that you're building upon, making better, but there has to be a seen improvement, adjustment, applied to a different area, taking something from over here, applying it in a way that can help someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. So you have, incremental improvements are significant. And so when I say a new idea, I don't mean the theory of relativity or, the invention of the laser. That happens, but and that's great, but my dissertation was nothing like that. It was an incremental improvement, and I had to be a salesperson to explain why it was so important and why they had to call me Dr. Smith after my defense. But the point well taken. So.
And also, I used to feel like that was the scariest thing for me as a graduate student. Like, I don't have all these great new ideas, But then when I was doing my postdoc, my advisor said, go back and look at your old presentations. What did you talk about the applications for those were? And I went through, and at the end of my dissertation proposal, I have all the future applications of this. Oh, look, there's like 6 ideas. Like, maybe they're not all great ideas, but there's 6 ideas of ways that I could take this. And so, it's building off of what I already know, but getting into different areas and see what you can do with what your resources are.
And a lot of these ideas will come from reading the literature, becoming really fully immersed in the literature. The better you know the existing literature, the more informed and better informed your new ideas can actually be.
And why do you have to be such a great salesperson? Because as a professor, one reason is you have to be an artist at being able to get people to reach into their pocket and write out a check or give you money, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to support you. And that is not easy. And so I see 2 ways that you can really make that sales pitch. Everyone, through their research, they've got data, right? That's part of your sales pitch. You've got hard data, you've got results, but data will only get you so far. You ever think about when you listen to President Obama at the State of the Union address, he will, and all the presidents do this, they'll roll out the data, they'll state facts, but then what do they always do? At some point, that camera will pan up to the top, and they have a narrative to marry to that data. They will show someone who was in some auto accident or someone in a wheelchair. They connect that data to a narrative. And that's what you guys have to do as an assistant professor. Even right now, when you defend your work, you're going to have data to show, but that doesn't necessarily move people. Okay? It does some, but most people, they have the data, and then they do need that little extra nudge to they need to understand, why is this so important? And when you share that narrative with them, that really helps them understand what you're doing. It helps them give you money to support your work. So it's very important. It's all about salesmanship. Okay, next slide. Let's now move toward the balancing act. As I mentioned at the beginning, with my beginning comments, a professor has 3 primary responsibilities: teaching, research, and service. Again, this is service. Okay, we're happy to do it. Okay, but this is service. No one's paying us. We didn't have to do. It's not in our contract. We just do this. We enjoy doing it. But research, I want to start with. Go to the next slide. this is what most of the professors do. I'll go ahead and read this. It says, most professors spend enormous amounts of time publishing or sharing in other ways their research and scholarly work with their colleagues. And 2, writing proposals for funding their activities. Many people, when they think of a professor, freshman coming in, they think, oh, Professor Conrad, she just teaches. That's all she does. That's, I don't want to say an afterthought, because that doesn't mean she cares about her teaching, but honestly, all of us up here spend ridiculous number of hours either writing proposals, writing papers. That we spend an enormous amount of time, and that's what we do. Yes?
Can you quantify that? Like how much time spent doing research, teaching, service, ideal? What's ideal? Or what each of you do?
Okay, I have my comments. I think I'm going to let go first. Does anyone want to comment first?
Well, I just made full professor, so ideally, I don't actually have to do anything anymore because currently I'm working on the following projects. I'm doing a study on the impact of food insecurity on child development. I'm doing a study on the impact of early iron deficiency anemia on cognitive impact at ages 4 and 6. I'm doing a study on teachers' views about computer-adapted testing. I'm working on a study having to do with the impact of Head Start on children's developmental trajectories into school readiness. I am working on a study having to do with how teachers are motivated and the specific impact of external motivation issues such as teacher evaluation plans on internal teacher motivation. And I have a proposal being reviewed to determine whether videotaping will impact medical students' abilities to respond on the MCAT as opposed to reading profiles. And I'm working on a study concerning the impact of teacher leadership on the ways that distributed leadership is understood in school districts. So that's 7 studies. I spend approximately 2 to 3 hours on each study per week, so that's between 14 and 21 hours on research.
And that, I remember as an assistant professor, and I'm same boat, but basically when I was teaching, I'm no longer teaching, I'm the associate dean, but when I was teaching and going through that tenure chase, I basically would go into the classroom, I would teach the class, and I have office hours, but honestly it was the bare minimum. Just count how many hours I spent in front of the students teaching, maybe an hour and a half in office hours. The rest of the time was writing proposals or writing papers. It's really, I don't know, I'm making up a number, but probably, is it unreasonable to say 75% of your time you spend not teaching or not devoted?
I think
More?
that's about right.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm developing my courses this year, so I'm spending a little bit more on teaching than I should be. But I could be that in a positive way. But no, I mean, I would. The thing you learn when you're teaching and doing research, it takes a lot more effort to be a good teacher than just to be a teacher. And so you end up, especially I think the first couple of years, spending a lot of time on those courses. But because I'm spending time on those courses, I'm working at night on my research, I'm going home, putting my kids to bed, and then working on writing papers, and working on proposals, or working to get my IRB turned in because I do human subject research. So, so I think it's like 50-50 right now, but I'm constantly feeling like I need to be doing more research.
But that's where she is, though, because one of the expectations is, as an assistant professor, it's a big feather in your cap if you develop new courses or introduce new courses. So yeah, it's a huge investment. Being a professor, you have all the flexibility in the world. So you can spend the 80 hours per week any way you want to. That's what they say. So not 40 hours. You're going to be working during the weekends. Yep.
How much of this research, when you say you're working on 6 or 7, how many different projects, is you alone as opposed to you maybe with another student, another professor? Because, it sounds like, you have so much to do by yourself, but, being a PhD student, I understand that professors usually, they have 5 things they're working on, but, they kind of lead, so to speak, the way for a couple projects, but they're not really, so to speak, first author on it or competing with others. So what percentage are you really working on by yourself?
Those are two different questions, because you're asking both how much are you working by yourself, but also how much are you in the lead. And your role as a lead author is going to shift between before you get tenure and after you get tenure. Before you get tenure, you need to be lead author on as many things as you can pull together.
Yeah, that's most of my question. Yeah.
After you get tenure, you're in a better position to begin to share out responsibility with other people. But when people are reviewing your tenure file, I have bitter experience with this, they don't value collaboration as highly as perhaps they should. On the other hand, when you are an assistant professor, you do have resources. One of your resources is working with other colleagues to work on developing new research projects. And ideally, if you're working with a place that has doctoral students, you get doctoral students in there. They can get their dissertation out of part of it, but they're working towards making the entire project move forward. And that's the best situation as a researcher, is to work collaboratively with people.
Why would a university have you work mostly on research and not is it just because we get money from the university, or are there any other reasons besides money? So I guess
Reputation.
It's all reputation.
Yeah.
And universities differ tremendously in terms of
Yeah.
how they balance the three: research, teaching, and service. Some universities will much more heavily emphasize research, where they be something like a 70% time on research, 15 teaching, 15 service. Other places will more heavily balance things in terms of teaching. So it
Yeah.
varies a lot.
Yeah, I have a colleague at the University of New Haven in which 75% of your time is expected to be spent on teaching. It's a teaching institution. My sister is a full professor at Carleton College. Undergraduate colleges tend to have heavily emphasized teaching, very little research expectations at that level.
Some ideas on how you can find out of the university. The job posting itself will tell you a lot. It will usually say responsibilities include, and in the order, research, teaching and advising, and service. Or teaching, and sometimes, especially I think in the teaching positions, it'll say 75%. So that's one clue. And then you can also look up the level of research institution it is. And that there's 3 years now, or did they change it?
Yeah, but you're actually better off looking at the people who are on the search committee and seeing what they've published. Because if you've got a search committee that doesn't have any publications in the general area, you know that you're looking at somebody who isn't looking for research.
And in the School of Engineering and Computer Science, we have a 40-40-20 breakdown. 40% research, 40% teaching, 40% service. For me personally, 20%, I'm sorry, I can't have. For me personally,
Actually, it's like 120.
exactly, 120, there you go.
Look at that.
Those numbers really meant very little to me.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, all I knew is that I had to teach. I had to do my very best at teaching. I don't care how many hours it took. I wanted to excel as a teacher. I didn't care about the 40%. Research, I've got goals, I've got to publish papers. So those numbers had very little meaning to me. Yeah.
Yeah, to keep beating on the subject. So we've talked about the split between research and teaching varying depending on university. Does it also vary depending on the level of teaching? Let's say when you're undergrad, or if you want to do grad, or when you go into like a teaching job, are you kind of like, does it differ if you want to maybe do undergrad teaching or graduate teaching, or do you just kind of?
Yeah. I mean, I think most professors at schools like Oakland University are expected to at least be able to teach both undergraduate and graduate, and they typically do teach both. It really depends, I think, upon the needs of the department. It's very specific.
Yeah.
There should be a specific course load, though. Like for us, it's 2 courses that you're teaching a semester. Some more research-intensive universities might just say 1.
And the course load is a really important thing to look at.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to decide what the breakdown is between research, teaching, and service, the course load will be one of the easiest things to look at. If it's a 1-1 teaching load, with 1-1 meaning 1 course in the fall, 1 in the winter or spring, that's going to tell you that they're probably going to have much higher research expectations. As the
Yeah.
teaching load begins to creep up, in general, the research expectations tend to creep down. So that's one of the really good things to look at.
But it's not entirely clear because a lot of research institutions set it up so that when you get a grant, you buy yourself out of teaching. Like at Michigan, it was a 3-3 load, but nobody taught a 3-3 load because their grant funding bought them a course release. And that's another way that it kind of slides in there.
Very good point. Yeah. Did everyone get that? So I mean, so you have a set of courses that you typically have to teach, but depending upon the money that you bring in, going back to the salesman, you can actually buy out, and so you can free yourself of those courses that you have to teach. And it sounds kind of bad, like it's a burden. You know, I don't want to make it sound like teaching is a burden, but it's really an honor. But you can only do so much.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, next slide. This is kind of, every professor always has to be really, really careful because as an assistant professor, actually particularly pre-tenure, there's incredible pressure for you to publish. And man, if you spend 2 years on some study and you find out that this is not generating interesting results, what do you do with that? And I just put this slide in because I mean, it's sometimes you can find your way accidentally getting in trouble by presenting data a certain way. People can call you out. So it's really just more of a just something to think about.
Well, we have more specific examples from Oakland. Being from the School of Education, I'll cop to it. One of our professors, who was recently the interim dean, had been found to have submitted the same study to 2 different journals. You don't do that. That's called self-plagiarism. And she was, she had to suffer sanctions, including being restricted from publishing for 5 years. And that's exactly this kind of pressure. You want to get more publications out of a single study, but you got to be really careful. One study, one publication, move on. Yeah.
Very important point. The culture of getting successful results is
Mm-hmm.
a culture, actually. But as Thomas Edison said, I don't have 100 failures. I know 100 ways to avoid failure.
Right.
So one of the emails interesting that I received just some time ago, one of the professors in Atlanta falsified the
Yes,
results.
the open access journal study. Mm-hmm.
Okay? So what if the researcher or professor reached this long research to failure or no result? This itself, I think, is a result.
Sure,
To make
sure.
himself or others avoid this
Yep.
failure. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, this culture,
Right.
I don't think it counts.
Well,
Yeah.
I think this goes